Hello, everybody. Today we're going to take a look at the final state for 2024 and see which way it might be trending. And as you can see right here, it's the state that had the narrowest margin in 2020, and that's going to be Georgia. So this is a close-up of the Peach State, and these are the presidential shifts between 2016 and 2020. The vertical lines indicate turnout. There are a few red lines, but where most of the population is, you can see it's going sharply to the left. So that suburban Atlanta vote is largely what caused the state to flip into Joe Biden's column. It's yet again expected to be a major battleground. Both sides desperately want to win this state, but before we get into more of the shifts, let's start by getting some background information. So Georgia maintains its 16 electoral votes, and in the last election, both Biden and Trump were under 50%, but Biden won it by about 0.2%. In 2016, Trump carried it by about 5%, so that's a pretty decent shift in just 4 years. Now also take note of the reduction in third-party vote in 2020 compared to 2016. So prior to the last election, this had mostly been known as a red state, even though it had been moving toward the left. In 2008, it was relatively close. McCain carried it by over 5. It wasn't even close during the Bush years, but then back in 96, it was a very narrow win for Bob Dole over Bill Clinton. But in 1992, the state did narrowly support Clinton. That was by about a half a point margin. In the 84 landslide for Reagan, it was also a landslide in Georgia by about 20 points. In 1980, though, it was a different story. Jimmy Carter, governor of Georgia, he was able to carry his home state by a very comfortable margin. And back in 76, it was an even wider margin for Carter. So a red state between 96 and 2016, Biden flipping it for the first time since 92. Now let's take a closer look at that last election. So again, we've got Biden at 49.47. Trump is at 49.24. That's roughly about a 12,000 vote margin out of just about 5 million cast. And again, there's a lot less third-party vote this time. Joe Jorgensen had the most with about 1.2. Now if we go down here to the county map, you can familiarize yourself with some of the notable cities. The biggest city is of course Atlanta, but some of the other ones we've got include Columbus, Macon, and Savannah. Now Georgia has 159 counties, so if we sort all those by the total number of votes cast, we can see in the top 4, Biden won those all by double digits. Fulton County has Atlanta, and that went for Biden by a massive 46. The largest county that Trump was able to win was Cherokee, and he was able to snag that by a comfortable 39. There are a number of sparsely populated counties that have a large black population, and those did support Biden easily. In most of the rural counties, though, Trump runs up his totals. Sometimes he even hits 60 or 70 points. So there's some clear polarization in some different ways in this state. But let's take a closer look at some of the shifts in these counties. For that, we're going to get on Ballotpedia. Now this time the shading does not indicate the margins. That just shows you how often they voted for the Democrat or the Republican in the past 3 elections. Now let's go right into Fulton County. So in this, it has about 10% of the statewide population. And going back to the days of Obama, it's clearly gotten bluer. It went from over 64 to almost 68 to over 72.5. On the other side, the support for the Republicans has fallen off. Romney got 34.5, and Trump has taken that down to 26.2. So that's a clear move to the left. But what about nearby DeKalb, or if you prefer, DeKalb County? That county was already even bluer than Fulton, and it's followed the same pattern. It was at about 78 for Obama. Then Hillary took it up over a point. Then Biden took it up 4 more points. Meanwhile, Trump declined about 4 from Romney. Then he sank another half a point in 2020. Now the suburban counties have become dominant in this state, and their shifts are highly important. So to the west, we've got Cobb County, and you can see back in 12, this one easily voted for Romney by over 10 points. Then in 16, it flipped. Hillary won it by 2. Then in 20, it went sharply to the left. Biden winning it by 14. So that is some massive movement just between 3 elections. Now to the east, we've got Gwinnett County. That one also voted for Romney by almost 10 points back in 12. It flipped in 16. Hillary won it by 6. Then in 20, Biden is winning it by a massive 18. If we go to nearby Henry County to the south, it's a similar pattern. Romney won it in 12 by a few points. Hillary flips it in 16. Then in 20, Biden is winning it by over 20. There's a lot of people that have moved to these suburbs over the past 1 or 2 decades, and what we've seen is a sharp movement away from the Republican Party. Now we can't look at every county, but let's take a look at another one that's outside of the Atlanta area. Let's look at where Savannah is. That's in Chatham County. This county did actually vote for Obama in 2012 by 12 points. In 16, with more third-party vote, Hillary was pretty stagnant. Meanwhile, Trump went down a few points. Then in 20, Biden improved on Hillary by over 3.5, and this time Trump was stagnant, but he lost about a half a point. So it does look pretty bleak here for Trump. However, if you look at these lighter red counties, these are the ones that actually voted for Obama in 12, but flipped and supported Trump in 16 as well as 20. There's not a lot of population in them, but that is a bright spot for Trump. Also, these blue counties, these are again mostly rural and do have a lot of black voters, and many of them did support Biden by comfortable margins. But a lot of the trends here have gotten redder. You could see in some of them Hillary doing worse than Obama, and then Biden doing even worse than Hillary. Meanwhile, on the other side, Trump getting his total up by a little bit each time. Now, it's not perfectly uniform in every county, 2020, and there's a lot less vote here than the Atlanta suburbs, but that's another potential place to take a look at where Trump might be able to make a few gains. Now, most of the other red rural counties in the southeast and in the northern part of the state, these are extremely red counties. They already supported Romney by massive margins, but then they got even redder where Trump is starting to win some of these even with over 80%. So you might say these counties are maxed out for Trump. It's always a possibility, but once you add up all that deep red rural vote, combined with very blue Atlanta and the suburbs, that again paints the picture of a state that has a lot of polarization, but it's also indicative of a nearly 50-50 state back in 2020. Now, to look at this data in another light, we can get on this map here, and this will show you the 2020 presidential vote all the way down to a detailed precinct level. So once you start zoomed out, outside of Atlanta, you do see a lot of red with a little bit of blue mixed in, but the Atlanta area is a gigantic blue blob. And if we zoom in on that area, you can see that in many of these precincts, Biden is already getting way over 90% of the vote. Once you go out into the suburbs, the blue does lighten up. Eventually, it does turn to red, and then eventually a darker red. So those suburbs are not at all as red as they used to be. But if we click right here, then we can see the shifts between 16 and 20. If we do that, then we see a couple of differences. First, in the Atlanta vicinity itself, there are actually some lighter red precincts that did shift toward Trump. Most of them are just by single digits, so it's not overwhelming. But that might be a little counterintuitive to some of the rest of the shifts we've seen. But the huge problem for Trump here is again going to be the suburbs. The vast majority of them did get bluer. A lot of those shifts are by double digits, some of them even into the 20s. So I sound like a broken record, but that is a ton of shift in a short period of time. If Harris is able to continue these trends at all, she should be able to win the state. Trump is going to have to be able to contain the bleeding at least a little bit here. But if you want an easier way to take a look at all the shifts in these Atlanta suburbs, here's a look at those counties going back to 1984. You can see back then just Fulton County was blue, and it wasn't even dark blue. The surrounding counties were all red. But then as you get into 2000 and after 2004, that's where you see those suburban counties, Cobb, Gwinnett, and Henry to the south, getting a lot lighter red, and then they start to flip and become blue, and then even darker blue. So that might be an easier way to showcase the trajectory of the state. Now, one other map we can take a look at here is going to be this one that has the red and the blue arrows. These are again the same shifts between 16 and 20. Blue shifted toward Biden, red shifted toward Trump. The bigger the arrow, the bigger the shift. So let's again look at that notable county outside the Atlanta area. That's going to be Chatham. Again, this has the city of Savannah. And between 16 and 20, both Biden and Trump gained a lot of votes here. But Biden gained about twice as much. He was at almost 16,000, while Trump was at about 7,500. And also keep in mind the third-party vote reduction was down about 54%. That's a raw 2.3% reduction down to just 1.4. And throughout all those shifts, Biden went up 3.1 and Trump sank at 0.8. So you could do the same thing for any of the other counties if you'd like. So another factor that might go into these shifts are going to be the shifts among specific demographic groups. So if we take a look at the exit polling specific to Georgia for 2020, we can see that Trump won men by 10, 54 to 44, but Biden won women by the exact same margin, 54 to 44. And you could look at some of the rest of these, but I'm going to skip down to the population density. Urban voters broke hard for Biden, 68 to 31, and suburban voters, they made up 50% of this survey. They went for Biden by 12, 55 to 43. That's going to be that key group of potentially persuadable voters. And another one I'll point out here is going to be independents. Only 4% of the survey, but they went for Biden by 27, 57 to 30. Again, all of these have some level of importance. But the other big one a lot of people are going to talk about is going to be the racial or the ethnic breakdown. White voters, who made up 64% of the survey, broke for Trump by 40 points, 69 to 29. Black voters, who made up 29% of the survey, broke really hard for Biden, 92 to 6. So Harris is going to try to maintain that 86% advantage. But theoretically, if Trump gains 2 or 3 points there, that could definitely be enough to flip the state if the other margins held. So you could spend some time looking at this data, but let's move on to the voter enthusiasm or the turnout. And this will show you what the turnout was in the last 3 federal elections. In 2018, the turnout here was about 54. In 2020, it spiked up to about 68. Then the top number is the last midterms, and it sank back down to just above 52. I would guess the turnout would be somewhere between 18 and 20. So even though Biden secured the state in 2020, and they also managed to flip some key Senate elections over the past few years, Republicans do have a strong statewide presence. Going back a couple of years ago to the midterm election, Governor Brian Kemp won re-election by a pretty comfortable margin. It was about 7.5 points. Trump would absolutely love to get these kinds of numbers. And this is also after the Supreme Court decision, where theoretically Democrats were more energized to come out and vote against that decision. And you can take a look at what the margins are in some of these counties. The last thing we're going to do is get back on Wikipedia and take a look at the polling accuracy back in 2020. So again, Biden wins the state by under a quarter point. The average of the aggregate polling did have Biden ahead by about 0.1. So that is very accurate. Real Clear Politics slightly overestimated Trump, 538 slightly overestimated Biden. And if you look at the individual individual polls, it was pretty much back and forth. Leading up to the election, Biden probably led just a little bit more often. So with all that said, which way will Georgia trend or shift or move? Well, given the movement in the suburbs sharply toward the left, it's easy to think that would continue at least a little bit. If it does, this state should be out of reach. However, in the midterm elections, even though it's a different turnout and a different electorate, Republicans were able to have some solid success. And it's clear that the Trump brand has been toxic for a lot of those suburbs. But given that the party in power is viewed unfavorably, those suburbs could move a few points back to the right. But it is a polarized state. Trump could make some gains with black voters. Harris could energize those voters and shut out Trump from any gains. It's really anybody's guess as to what's going to happen. Both sides can absolutely make a case for claiming this state, and it once again could come down to a tiny fraction of ballots, possibly even after Election Day. So we'll see what happens, but that's a look at what's going on in Georgia. So let me know in the comments, what do you think about this state? Do you think all the suburban trends indicate that Harris should be able to hold the state? Or do you think Brian Kemp winning and the unpopularity of the Biden administration gives Trump a clear opening to be able to flip it? Which counties or which demographics are you taking a look at the most? Let me know down below. On your way out, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Join if you'd like to support the channel. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.